Welcome, everybody, to Cinema Royale. I am Travis Hobson of PunchdrunkCritics.com. In this episode of Cinema Royale, we are finally getting around to talk Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's epic film about the murder of the Osage Native American tribe in the 1920s in Oklahoma over their oil head rights. I had heard of this story in little bits and pieces before I read the book, Killers of the Flower Moon. And then I read the book, and the book is fantastic. Like, I love the novel. And I was a little curious how Scorsese was going to adapt it. The one thing he changes in it that I didn't necessarily care for is that the book is a bit more of a mystery, I think, than the movie is.
Yeah.
The movie, it's fairly obvious everything that's happening, who's behind it, and what's going on. In fact, they make that the central premise of it, is the duality of the Ernest Burkhart character, who's selfishly involved in this money-making scheme at the cost of his wife Molly's family, while at the same time, I think, genuinely being in love with her. The book is, like I said, fairly more of a mystery. You don't know exactly who's behind everything and what's going on. And Ernest's part, is, while big, isn't nearly as pronounced as it is in this. And as I have apparently forgotten to introduce Cortland Jacoby, who is right next to me. But then again, does Cortland Jacoby need introduction anyway?
I mean, maybe.
So. I don't think so. Cortland needs no introduction. You know her from Punch Drunk Critics, and of course from this show as well. How are you doing, Cortland?
I'm good. I'm
I
excited.
would have gotten around to it.
I'm excited to sit and talk to you about this movie because, like if you saw our episode on Oppenheimer, I think there's a lot of stuff to discuss.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you on here to talk about it because you've been sort of the Lily Gladstone whisperer, I guess, on this side, I guess. You've seen just about everything she's been in this year. I think everything she's been in this year.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to that, I mean, like, this is going to be the big movie for her this year, the one that the breakthrough role, I think. Although I'm not so sure she's ever going to be like A-list actress, and I think that's probably going to be largely her decision, not anyone else's decision. She just doesn't seem like a type. To me, she reminds me of a Michelle Williams, who could be that kind of actress if she wanted to be, but is, I think, deliberately chosen not to. I feel like Lily Gladstone's on that same kind of journey. But you've seen all our movies this year. Talk to me about how her role as Molly in this film compares to those and what you've seen for her this entire year.
Well, if I can just say too, she was in the middle of signing up for data analytics courses when Martin Scorsese called and said, "Hey, I want to tell you you got in this movie." So like for her to seem as this established actress, of course she's been in a lot of things, but it seems like whenever I watch an interview with her, she always has one foot out the door. So I think that's really important to say. She's the breakout star of this movie. I would say I wish they even gave her more to do. And we'll talk about how the Osage are represented because that feeds into this. But as for where she kind of fits into, this film fits into her career this year. She had a guest role on Reservation Dogs, which, if you haven't seen Reservation Dogs, is the best show on television. It just wrapped up its third season.
The final season, right?
The final season.
Right. Then I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to watch it. It's over.
It's a breezy, like 30. You could watch the entire thing in a day, and it's some of the best television. It's strong start to finish, some great acting. She's in 2 episodes in the series, and she's a like powerhouse in both episodes she's in, and she's in the final episode of season 3 and of the series, and she's great. So she was in that. She was in a cinematic poem, I would say, called Unknown Country, where she travels from, I believe it's Montana all the way to Texas, and they kind of interview everyday people along the way, though it is
about that one. You liked that one, didn't you?
I've liked everything she's been in this year. That I really liked. You'll love it because it's only 80 minutes, Travis. We love a good runtime, short runtime here. Um, yeah, so I really did love that. She has such a quiet, nuanced performance in that I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think the role for me that shows Lily Gladstone in her range the most is Erica Tremblay's Fancy Dance. Um, it has, if you have been lucky enough to see it, you've probably seen it in some festivals. I first saw it at Sundance this year. It's making the festival rounds. It's at Virginia this weekend. Um, and
It's a long, long time of festival rounds.
yeah, it
You
still
get
has
old
not received
of festivals.
full American distribution yet.
Yeah.
I believe there's international distribution, but not full American, which I don't understand. It is the best thing I saw at Sundance, as I've said 45 times on the show. She plays a woman who is taking care of her niece. Her sister has disappeared and they don't know what's going on. But because of her troubled past with drugs and jail time, um, the authorities threatened to take her niece away. And so it is a comedy. There is some comedic moments, but it really does bring into very important questions into the Indigenous community has grappled with over the last 2 years, which is murdered and missing Indigenous women, and who has the right to raise American children or Native American children. Specifically, I don't know if anybody follows politics on this show. We are in DC, but ICWA was just not overturned, but solidified by the Supreme Court, saying that Indigenous people should raise their own children, which I agree with. So if you do get a chance to see these films, I highly recommend all of them, even Killers of the Flower Moon. I have complicated feelings about it, but Lily Gladstone, I think, is really a solid actress. And through her filmography this year, we've definitely seen a full range of that. And I'm excited to see what she does in the future.
Me too. I'm really a big fan of hers, and her kind of coming out role, I believe, was in Certain Women a few years ago, which I think was a Kelly Reichardt film. And I liked her in that. I thought she was the best thing about that movie. And I've been following her ever since. I need to catch up with all these movies that you keep talking about with her this year. I feel bad to having a chance to see any of them yet. But I really want to, because I think she's really good in this too. She's kind of the heart and soul of it as Molly. Molly's the heart and soul of the book as well. I mean, she's the one who's watching her entire family fall victim to this scheme. But Molly is a complicated character as well. She's got a lot of her own issues, her own problems, and it's interesting to watch the dynamic between her and Ernest, DiCaprio's character, because she seems to kind of know that he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? She spots it, but I think she loves the man that she wants him to be. Like she sees the man that he could be, that she wants him to be, and I think she lets that blind her, throughout all of this. So there's a lot going on with her character. I kind of agree. I think you and I might agree with this, that I kind of wish she had a bit more to do. Like, she's really good in the scenes that she has, especially with DiCaprio, but or with Tantu Cardinal, who's also fantastic in this too. But I feel like in the final act, the third act, she does not have much other than kind of writhing in bed. There's not a whole lot there's not
Mhm.
for her. She kind of
And
gets lost as they shift focus to the investigation, which in the book, when it shifts gears into the investigation, when the Bureau of Investigations gets involved, the book also becomes something different. It's not the same as it was before. I think less interesting as well. And I kind of felt that way about the movie too. It also got a little less interesting for me, as much as I love Jesse Plemons and stuff like that. It's just the interest is in the dynamic between Molly and Ernest more than anything else. So the investigation itself was the thing I was least invested in.
I would argue too that like that final act, that third act, it feels the longest of any of them. So
It really
your leading
does.
lady, if she's not in it enough, um, I feel like that's an issue.
Yeah. It also features really awful Brendan Fraser performance. He's in it for like a minute, but it's like a really bad minute. It's
I, I
like a really bad minute. It's like pro wrestling level acting, like in that. And I'm a pro wrestling fan, and pro wrestling acting is terrible, but it's like really bad acting by Brendan Fraser in the movie. And I was like, they didn't even need to put that scene in here. Like somebody should have known to cut it out. Like that's how bad it is. And I feel like it's only in there because it's Brendan Fraser in the role. Like if it was anybody else, they would have cut it out.
I feel like too towards that last, or definitely in the third act, that's when we get all of these like celebrity cameos in a way. You've got him, you've got John Lithgow, Jack White pops up in the final 3 minutes
It
of
was
the
weird.
movie. Um,
Yeah,
it took me out of it, I'll
yeah,
be honest, and I don't necessarily
yeah.
know like what choice it was serving. Again, to not to compare it to Oppenheimer, but we had a really big discussion about all of these other, glorified cameos and whether or not they worked. And I think that question here stands of like, I don't understand. I mean, it's cool to see Jack White on stage doing kind of like a little radio performance, but like, why?
Yeah. And bear in mind, I like that sequence though. Like I like the framing of the story as this old timey radio serial. I like that aspect of it, and I like the way he uses it to kind of reframe the movie in a sense, and kind of give it back to the Native Americans. I like that. I think that was a good idea. If you're going to be Martin Scorsese telling a story that belongs to the Osage, you need to reframe it that way and remind people of that. I think this was a good way to do it. I just didn't like just kind of the randomness of the people that were showing up. It just didn't make.
Yeah, yeah. One person that I don't know if you follow folk music, Americana music at all, Travis, but one person who has a pretty large role, who's never acted before, is Jason Isbell, who plays Bill Smith, who is Molly's brother-in-law
Yeah,
twice, we find out.
yeah,
I feel like his performance is so, I loved it. I really, really liked his performance. I thought it was very well crafted for a non-actor.
mhm,
Um, and he definitely hit every note that character had to hit. He is very much a foil to Ernest, and De Niro's Hale character, except there's something more compassionate and kind about him.
yeah.
Um, and I thought he did an amazing job, and really, like, it's hard to hold your own with Leonardo DiCaprio in a scene, and I thought he did very, very well.
It's a complicated role because I don't think because we're kind of trained to not trust any of the white people in the movie. So
Correct.
when you
Yeah.
first meet him, you're kind of like, yeah, shady,
Yeah.
you
And there
know.
is something untrustworthy about him. I mean, he married two of the women who received
Right,
these land rights.
right.
One of them does pass, but he's not. He's taking advantage of the situation, but then also seems to genuinely care for these
Right.
women.
Which is not that far different from Ernest. Uh,
Right. So I would argue, earlier you said that Ernest loved Molly. I would
I think he
argue,
does. I think he does. And I think that's part of the debate. You don't really know. And I think that's fair. I can see the other side of it, trust me. But I think he generally does love her. And I think it's a tug and pull between how much he loves her and how much he loves money, but also how much he fears, his uncle. Like
right.
there's a lot tugging away at him in this movie, which is part of the reason why it's so compelling.
It kind of, for me, kind of, this is going to be a weird comparison, but did you see The Last of Us?
Yeah.
So that episode with Nick Offerman, that Nick Offerman episode where he plays a gay man who's sort of like a survivalist, and then this guy comes and they have a romance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sort of reminded me of that, in the way of like, this guy comes in and he's clearly there to take advantage of the situation, but then over time there's feelings that develop. I feel like it was probably more like that, rather, not, maybe not pure love, but you can't live with someone for what, 10 years and have children with them and not at least care. It doesn't mean that you're not going to go off and try to murder them later. But
So what you mean is it's like all those romantic comedies where the guy gets with the girl as part of a prank, and then he actually falls in love with her, and
yeah,
then she finds out, and he's like, no, I really did love you the whole time, and she
Yeah,
doesn't believe him.
absolutely. Except there's murder involved. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
not,
What
it's
is
not
that?
she. It's not she's all that. It's Killers of the Flower Moon, right? So,
Or 10 Things I Hate About You.
or any of a million other
Yeah,
teen
yeah,
comedies with the same plot.
yeah.
You said you had complicated feelings about the depiction of the Osage in this. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I feel like I should start off by saying I am white. I
What?
am not an Osage
What?
person, so I feel like I can't speak for their community. I think as someone who has been very enraptured in a lot of the media that's come out of Indigenous spaces in the last year, I felt like this was not the best representation. Um, I also read the book, and what's so fascinating about the book is the first couple chapters just go into 200 years of Osage history and how the US government has systemically oppressed them. And there's none of that in
It
the
kind of gets mentioned in the
it
beginning.
gets mentioned about the land rights and how white people came in
How they
and
were forced to move and things like that.
would
They
have
mentioned.
conservatorships. And the white people would control the money that these people were getting from the oil rights from their
I
land.
wish they had talked about that more because there are a lot of
Yeah.
times where we see the Osage coming to white people to get their own money, and they don't address why that's happening. Like, why does she have to go to this white guy in an office somewhere to get money to pay for her medicine and stuff like that? Like stuff like that, I wish they could have addressed more. For a 3 hour plus movie, you'd think there would have been time, but apparently there wasn't.
I think also too, like I wouldn't have known that what was happening if I hadn't read the book. So um I wish that was went into more detail. I think because, and I get it, you have De Niro and DiCaprio in these two leading roles. It's dumb not to focus on them the entire time, right? I think this also feeds into what you said about, we know the mystery 30 minutes in. We know who did it. We know what we're basically watching these white people kill the Osage for 2 hours after that.
Although there's not that much violence in the movie, not really.
No. I will say there's a couple, like maybe two gore scenes, and that's it. But you do feel the plotting and the scheming throughout that time. But because of the mystery not being there like it is in the novel or in the book, um, it feels a little exploitative. It feels very voyeuristic as a viewer. I wanted more Molly. It would have been so interesting to see this from her perspective and then maybe Tom Waite's perspective of like her family just falling off. And I get that that means that DiCaprio would take a backseat role, but I think it would also mean that the Osage people were featured more. And that's where the story matters, right? Like we got a sense of this story in the Jimmy Stewart film, The FBI Story. This story is touched upon in there as well. And we don't get that here at all. Um, you
I
know,
wouldn't say at all. They're just
not
not.
at all.
There's
There is
not as much.
voiceover,
I think Scorsese makes an effort. I actually think he does.
right?
I think he's also juggling the needs of the movie and the needs of the stars that are in it. And I think he makes a genuine effort, a genuine good faith effort to try as best he can. I think he does. Uh,
I think he does as well. I mean, I think he makes a genuine effort. Now, whether or not that effort pays off, I mean, there's also a question of like, the movie that I would want for Killers of the Flower Moon doesn't necessarily have an Italian white man directing it, right?
this
Like,
this all ties into the thing that I've been grappling with over the last couple of weeks, and I talked about it a little bit at Middleburg. How little interest I have in Michael Mann's upcoming Ferrari, and how I have zero interest in Ridley Scott's Napoleon. Like I have no interest in either one of them. And I was thinking about filmmakers of this certain generation trying to make these old movies that they would have made 30 years ago, that probably would have meant something to people back then. But now it just feels like old white men telling old white men stories, and I just don't feel that interested in it. And I don't really care. And I think the audience has proven they don't give a shit either. Like they don't want to see these movies either. But at least Scorsese's out here trying to tell a different kind of story. Like I still feel like Scorsese's relevant. Because
right.
at least with a movie like this, he's trying to tell a story that nobody was trying to tell, that about people that nobody makes movies about. And at least he's doing something, like doing something different. Those other two guys, hey, they making movies that I don't care if I ever go see those two movies. I mean, I will, of course, but if I never were to see them, it would not affect me one bit.
It makes me wonder what a Sterling Harjo Killers of the Flower Moon would look like, or what, an Erica Tremblay Killers of the Flower Moon would look like. I mean, granted, out of all of the white directors working today, Scorsese did a really admirable job talking to the Osage people, meeting with them, and trying to find the best way to tell the story that honors that people and doesn't necessarily subject them to more trauma.
And the truth is, the movie probably doesn't get made if it doesn't have Scorsese attached.
Absolutely. Well, I would say probably, they started this movie, close to 5 years ago? I don't think 5 years ago, maybe. I think if this story started to be talked about now, maybe with all of the films that are coming out, and stuff like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls and all of these like indigenous shows, but I will say that I think though he attempts, I don't necessarily know if he fully pulls it off. And I think that's why so many people are clinging to that Lily Gladstone performance, because it does feel authentic. It does feel real. We are, she's a reprieve from the white nonsense that we see on screen. And I guess that's why I wanted more of it.
Yeah, to me, I absolutely loved it. Still, I loved almost everything about it. While agreeing that there's some things that could have been improved for sure, but it has the epic scope that I like from my Scorsese movies. Makes me feel like Gangs of New York and things like that. It makes me feel like he puts me in these places, and I feel like I'm there, and I feel like that here in this case too. It's a really fully realized place that he's created, and I like that. But it's imperfect, but I'm dying to see it again. Like, and I'm probably going to go see it again this weekend, maybe if I can. So yeah, I think this movie's definitely one of the best he's done recently.
Absolutely.
I'll watch this a million times more before I watch The Irishman again, and I'll probably never watch Silence again in my life. So I mean,
I'm one of those people who think Silence is a masterpiece, but sure.
I'm not saying that Silence is bad. I just won't watch it.
Yeah, the rewatchable factor. Yeah.
That movie's a little too much of a tough watch for me. I don't even think The Irishman's bad. I think it's fine, but I saw it twice in like a week, and
then you're good for the rest of your life.
I was like, good,
yeah.
Good. I'll never forget being at the premiere of that in Man Chinese Theater in LA, and Tim will tell you somebody was in that joint snoring so loud. But Irishman, it was unavoidable. Like everybody in the place could hear that one person snoring his ass off. So it was rough. It was rough. Man, but this has been our talk on Killers of the Flower Moon. I think we both can recommend it. I recommend it a little bit more highly than I think Cortland does, but we both think you should go check it out in theaters while it's there now. I think
if I can say I do recommend it. I also recommend watching some of the other stuff that I've mentioned and going back and really looking into indigenous indie film, because that is where the stories are being told from an authentic point of view. So do it, but with homework.
There you go. I can't wait until Apple breaks it down into like a 6-part miniseries or something, because they probably will.
Yeah.
And which I actually think could be good for the movie, actually, especially when you see stories that are out there now about theaters forcing an intermission into the movie. The movie's over 3 hours. I did not feel the need for an intermission necessarily. I think if you do have an intermissions in a movie, it should be for movies that are 4 hours plus. Like that to me seems like, okay, I get it. Intermission, fine. But 3 hours, get over it, dude.
Yeah, I mean, also we were yelled at multiple times by the PR people to use the bathroom beforehand. So I think that also helped. I mean, also from an accessibility standpoint, I think an intermission is probably good. Do I know where they would put it? No, I don't, because I do think it is a very cohesive film. But
put it during all the Lily Gladstone scenes. Just kidding, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Put it during the Brendan Fraser scene.
Yeah.
If you have to go to that one. Go do it then.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been our talk on Killers of the Flower Moon. Thank you, Cortland, for joining me to talk about the film. You can find her work at punchdrunkcritics.com every day, just like you can mine. And of course, you can find me in multiple places here in DC as well. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Thanks for checking out the show.
If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.